The early November sun cast a pale glow over the Redstone Plains, the rolling hills of John Parker's 200-acre Texas ranch stretching wide under a sky heavy with the threat of rain. The lake shimmering faintly in the distance, its surface rippling with a restless wind, the wildflowers along the pastures' edge trembling in muted hues of yellow and purple, their delicate petals clinging to life against the vast expanse of the untamed land. At 54, John had poured his life into this ranch, 3 generations of organic farming etched into its soil. The ancient oaks dotting the landscape, standing like silent sentinels, their gnarled branches heavy with the weight of history, the air thick with the scent of earth and cedar. The faint lowing of cattle blending with the distant call of a hawk, the plains stretching wide and unbroken, their roots deep in the Texas soil. After discovering his birth family, John had hoped for a season of renewal, but the burn scar on his forearm throbbed with a dull ache as he woke to a truck in his driveway, men in expensive suits approaching with documents. His stomach tightening. The lawsuit had arrived last week, but seeing these corporate representatives from AgriCorp Corporation made it real. The wildflowers enduring despite the storms that had come before. John stood on the porch, the red barn in the distance needing a fresh coat of paint. But he'd never found the time between tending crops and managing sales at the Redstone Farmers Market. The men handing him a thick envelope, their faces cold. "You've been served, Mr. Parker. Court dates in 30 days. Driving off without another word, John's hands trembling as he opened the documents. AgriCorp, claiming his heirloom corn and peppers contained genetic material they'd patented, a claim John knew was impossible. He used seeds passed down through generations, carefully preserved in his father's old filing cabinet, the lake glowing silver in the distance, its calm a stark contrast to the tension knotting his gut. That evening, Ethan joined him at the kitchen table, his voice small, worried. "Are we going to lose the ranch, Grandpa?" the 14-year-old asking, understanding enough to be scared, John pulling him close. "I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that doesn't happen," but privately wondering how he could fight AgriCorp, their annual revenue dwarfing the GDP of small countries. The ranch barely clearing $60,000 in a good year, the wildflowers along the porch trembling in the breeze, the plains pulsing with the weight of history, their roots deep in the Texas soil. "They're saying our seeds are theirs," John explained to Mary Ellen that night, her hand squeezing his. "How can they patent something that's been growing naturally for centuries?" Mary Ellen's voice steady. "We should talk to a lawyer," John shaking his head. "With what money?" "A consultation fee alone would cost us a month of groceries." The next morning, driving to the county clerk's office, the woman behind the desk giving him a sympathetic look. "You're the 3rd small rancher this year. AgriCorp has an entire legal department. They file these suits knowing most can't afford to fight." John attending a community meeting in Redstone, other local farmers gathering, some having sold their land to developers rather than face similar battles. Frank Hensley sharing. "They offer me a settlement, said I could keep ranching if I bought their seeds exclusively and paid licensing fees. Couldn't afford it. 30 years of work gone." John returning home, walking his fields as the sun set, his father having taught him to farm this land, hoping to teach Ethan the same, now taking inventory of what they could fit in their truck when they had to leave. The wildflowers along the fields trembling in the evening light, the plains stretching wide and unbroken, their roots deep in the Texas soil. That night, John called his newly discovered cousin, Sheriff Mar Daniels, about possibly moving in temporarily, starting to pack photo albums and family heirlooms. The kitchen table covered with past due notices and lawsuit papers when the phone rang the next morning, John almost not answering, but something making him pick up. "Mr. Parker, this is Daniel Rivera with Coastal Justice Legal Group." John gripping the phone tighter. "If you're selling legal services, I can't afford them," Daniel replying. "We're not selling anything. We're a nonprofit that helps farmers facing corporate patent lawsuits. We'd like to represent you against AgriCorp at no cost." John sitting down, skeptical. "Why would you do that?" Daniel's voice firm. "Because what they're doing isn't just wrong, It's potentially illegal. We've been tracking these cases for years, arranging to meet the following morning. John spending the night researching coastal justice online, finding they were legitimate, with several successful cases against large corporations, the lake shimmering faintly beyond the ridge. Its surface a mirror of the hope that endured. When a modest sedan pulled into his driveway the next day, John watched from the porch. 3 people emerging, a woman in her 40s with a briefcase, a younger man carrying a laptop, and an older gentleman with silver hair. "Mr. Parker, I'm Daniel Rivera," the older man said, extending his hand. "This is Amara Okafor, our lead attorney, and Tyler Chun, our agricultural patent specialist." John leading them to the kitchen table, Amara spreading out the lawsuit documents. "AgriCorp claims your crops show traces of their patented genes, but their testing methods are questionable. We've seen them fabricate evidence before," John insisting. "I've never used their seeds. My family has saved our own for generations," Tyler nodding. "That's exactly why they're targeting you. Heritage farmers threaten their business model. We need to take samples from your fields and see your seed storage records." John showing them to his father's filing cabinet. Handwritten logs dating back to 1965, each seed variety cataloged with planting locations and harvest dates. "This is excellent," Tyler said, photographing each page. "Most farmers don't have records this detailed. The wildflowers along the barn's edge trembling in the breeze, the plains pulsing with the weight of survival. Their roots deep in the Texas soil." As they walked the fields, John noticed a black SUV parked on the county road, 2 men with cameras photographing them. AgriCorp's investigators. Daniel explaining calmly, "They're trying to intimidate you. Ignore them." That evening, after the lawyers left, John receiving a call from AgriCorp's legal department. "We understand you've contacted outside counsel. We're prepared to offer a settlement. You can continue farming if you sign an exclusive contract with us." John replying, "I need to discuss this with my lawyers." Remembering Daniel's advice not to engage directly, the voice cold. "Small farmers can't win against us, Mr. Parker. Ask your new friends how many cases like yours they've actually won." John hanging up, his hands shaking, the threat clear, but for the first time in weeks feeling a glimmer of hope. The lake glowing silver in the distance, its calm a testament to the peace John had won. 2 weeks passed in a blur of legal preparations, the coastal justice team working from John's dining room, gathering evidence, preparing their defense. John continuing his ranch work, though his heart wasn't in it. What was the point of tending crops he might lose? The wildflowers along the pastures trembling in the morning light, the plains stretching wide and unbroken, their roots deep in the Texas soil. One Tuesday morning, John drove to the Redstone Farmers Market, less produce than usual, but needing whatever income he could get, setting up his stand. Noticing an elderly man struggling with heavy crates of homemade jams. "Let me help you with those," John offered, moving to assist. "Much appreciated," the man said, breathing heavily. Getting too old for this heavy lifting. John carrying the crates to the man's booth. "I'm John Parker," introducing himself. "Harold Winters," the man replying. "You're the organic rancher from Redstone, aren't you?" John nodding. "For now, at least. Heard about your trouble with AgriCorp." "Nasty business," Harold said. John helping arrange the jars on the display table. Despite his own problems, feeling good to focus on someone else's needs. "My daughter makes these jams," Harold explaining. "I'm just a salesman. My hands shake too much these days for canning." John smiling. "We're doing a great job. Here, let me fix this wobbly table," stabilizing the legs with some cardboard. Setting up Harold's chair and umbrella before returning to his own stand. The lake shimmering faintly beyond the town, its surface a mirror of the hope that endured. The market was slow that day. By noon, John having sold only half his produce. Noticing Harold hadn't made many sales either, the old man looking tired in the heat. During a lull, John bringing Harold a cold water from his cooler. "Stay hydrated," saying, Harold accepting the bottle. "Thank you, son." Not many folks would notice an old-timer struggling, chatting throughout the afternoon, Harold a retired teacher. His daughter, a single mom, working 2 jobs while making jams on weekends. At closing time, John having several unsold baskets of peppers and corn, rather than take them home, bringing them to Harold. For your daughter. Maybe she can use them for her next batch of jams. Harold surprised. That's very generous, especially with what you're going through. John replying, my parents taught me we're never too poor to share. Besides, they'll just go to waste otherwise. A woman in a business suit watching this exchange from several booths away, making notes in her phone before walking to her car. The wildflowers along the market trembling in the breeze, the plains stretching wide and unbroken, their roots deep in the Texas soil. That evening, John received another call from AgriCorps, increasing their settlement offer, adding veiled threats about court costs, politely declining again. They're getting nervous. Amara telling him when he reported the call, our case must be stronger than they expected. 3 days before the court date, John waking to the sound of vehicles coming up his driveway, looking out to see 3 black SUVs and a town car pulling in, his heart sinking. Had AgriCorps sent more people to pressure him, Daniel's sedan arriving moments later, skidding to a stop on the gravel. Jumping out, looking concerned. John, I just got word that. Pausing, seeing the vehicles. Oh, they're already here. John stepping onto the porch. Who's here? A distinguished-looking woman in her 60s emerging from the town car, followed by several people carrying briefcases and equipment. Daniel's expression changing from worry to surprise. That's Catherine Winters. She's one of the top environmental attorneys in the country. The woman approaching. Mr. Parker, I'm Catherine Winters. I believe you met my father, Harold, at the farmer's market last week. John staring in disbelief. Harold, is your father? Catherine nodding. He told me about your kindness to him. I've been following your case from afar. But now I'd like to join your legal team, if you'll have me. Daniel stunned. Winters normally charges $1,000 an hour. Catherine smiling. This one's pro bono. My firm has been building a class action against AgriCorps for years. Your case could be the linchpin we need, the lake glowing silver in the distance. It's come a testament to the peace John had won. Catherine's team transformed John's living room into a war room. Laptops open, documents spread across tables, phone calls made in hushed tones. AgriCorps has sued 67 small farmers in the past 5 years, Catherine explaining. Most settled because they couldn't afford to fight. But we've been gathering evidence that they've been deliberately contaminating organic farms through wind-carried pollen, then suing when their patented genes show up in crops. John asking, can we prove that? Catherine nodding, we have satellite imagery showing their test fields upwind from targeted farms. Internal emails discussing conversion opportunities when organic farms show trace contamination. And now, thanks to your meticulous records, we can show a clear timeline of when this started happening. That afternoon, Amara receiving a call from AgriCorps' legal department, putting it on speaker. We're prepared to drop all claims against Mr. Parker, the voice saying, we'll also provide compensation for his trouble in exchange for a non-disclosure agreement. This offer expires at 5 p.m. Today, Catherine looking at John after the call. They're scared. They know we have something. What do you think you should do? John thinking about Frank Hensley, who'd lost his ranch, about Ethan, who deserved security, about his father and grandfather, who'd taught him to stand up for what was right. I want to fight, saying finally, not just for me, Catherine nodding. Then let's get to work. The real battle starts tomorrow. The wildflowers along the fields trembling in the breeze, the plains stretching wide and unbroken, their roots deep in the Texas soil. The county courthouse was packed on the morning of the hearing, local farmers filling the benches, along with reporters from agricultural journals and a crew from a regional news program. AgriCorps' legal team occupying one table, 6 attorneys in expensive suits, at the other table sitting John with Catherine, Daniel, Amara, and Tyler, David versus Goliath made flesh, the judge. An older woman with gray hair and reading glasses, reviewing the documents. I understand AgriCorps is claiming patent infringement. AgriCorps' lead attorney standing. Yes. Your Honor, our tests show Mr. Parker's crops contain our patented genetic material, Catherine rising. Your Honor, we have evidence that any contamination of Mr. Parker's crops was deliberate on AgriCorps' part. part of a systematic campaign to eliminate independent organic farmers, presenting their evidence methodically, the satellite images, the internal emails discussing conversion targets, the pattern of lawsuits following the same timeline, and most damaging, testimony from a former AgriCorps employee who'd worked in their farm acquisition division. It was my job to identify organic farms that could be sued, testifying. We specifically targeted farms upwind from our test fields, knowing cross-pollination would occur naturally, the lake shimmering faintly beyond the town, its surface a mirror of the hope that endured. During a recess, AgriCorps' attorneys approached with a new offer, Catherine bringing it to John. They'll drop all claims, pay your legal expenses, and offer compensation of $250,000, but they want confidentiality. John shaking his head. If we keep this quiet, they'll just target someone else. When court resumed, the judge announcing her decision. I'm dismissing AgriCorps' case with prejudice. Furthermore, I'm referring this matter to the Department of Justice for investigation of potential antitrust violations and fraud. The courtroom erupting. John sitting stunned as farmers came to shake his hand, pat his back. 6 months later, John standing in his fields, watching Ethan help plant the spring crops, the class action suit against AgriCorps proceeding. Over 100 farmers now participating. The company's stock dropping 30% after the Justice Department announced its investigation. Catherine establishing a legal fund to help other farmers fight similar battles. John now serving on its advisory board, sharing his experience with others facing corporate intimidation. The wildflowers along the fields blooming anew, their colors vibrant in the Texas sun. The plains stretching wide and unbroken, their roots deep in the Texas soil. The Parker Ranch was thriving, local customers, having heard his story, making special trips to buy his produce. John even expanding his organic certification to include new varieties of vegetables. One sunny afternoon, Harold Winters visiting the ranch, sitting on the porch, drinking lemonade. Did you know who your daughter was when we met? John asking, Harold smiling. I knew she was a lawyer, but I didn't plan to tell her about you. That was all her doing after I mentioned the kind rancher who helped an old man. John nodding. Small acts can have big consequences, Harold replying. That's the thing about kindness. You never know how far it will reach. That evening, John walking his property alone, touching the leaves of plants his family had tended for generations. The fight not over. AgriCorps and companies like them still having tremendous power, but something having shifted. One rancher standing his ground, the earth beneath the giants trembling. Sometimes that enough to start changing the world. The lake glowing gold outside as the last rays of dusk faded, the wildflowers enduring despite the storm, their roots deep in the Texas soil. The crew gathered in the yard, coffee steaming in mugs, the air thick with the scent of roasted beans and the faint tang of hay that clung to their clothes. Ethan slouched in a chair, his face steady, trust forged in the fight's fire, the map spread wide across the table. The northern fields marked in green ink, a testament to the day's victory. The lantern light casting long shadows over their weary faces. The lake glowing gold outside as the last rays of dusk faded, the plains stretching wide and unbroken, wildflowers battered but enduring, their roots deep in the Texas soil. Field spoke, Frank said, leaning back, his pistol gleaming on his hip, his voice gravelly but sure. You answered. Grayson won't like this. Mary Ellen poured coffee, her hand firm, her voice edged with steel. Victory's a sign. Your roots are a wall, John. We'll stand. Jake grinned, his fists unclenching, dust still smudged on his face. You beat him, Ethan too. He's fierce now. Sarah nodded from the corner, her phone glowing with Elena's last update, her voice resolute. Story's out. Justice is alive. We'll keep it growing. Matt tapped his laptop, fingers pausing as he met John's gaze, his tone sharp. Grayson's moving, saw the ruling. I'll dig. Won't stop till we know. Tom stood by the door, lantern dimming, his broad frame a silent pillar, his voice low but firm. I'll watch the ridge. Plains are calm, but eyes ain't. John met Ethan's gaze across the table. The boy's eyes steady despite the weight of the day, his hands still steady from the fight, and John's voice cut through the room like steel tempered in fire. You stood today. Fought like a Parker. That's good. Keep it up, Ethan. The win's just a start. We've got more coming. Ethan swallowed hard, nodding slow, his voice quiet but raw. I will, Grandpa. Swear it. No more fearing. The room fell silent, the lake glowing silver outside as the night deepened, the plains stretching wide and unbroken, wildflowers battered but enduring, their roots deep in the Texas soil. John rose, rifle close, stepping onto the porch where the air smelled of earth and renewal, his eyes scanning the ridge where the fields had stood firm. The memory of his victory a warm weight on his heart, the legacy of his past a bond he'd carry until the end. Across the horizon, a light blinking, binoculars catching the starlight, then vanishing into the trees, a shadow still breathing in the darkness, a reminder that the fight was far from over, the wildflowers along the plains' edge blooming anew, their colors vibrant in the Texas night, the lake glowing silver in the distance, its calm a testament to the peace John had won, but the storm on the horizon a promise of battles yet to come.